you very much for that very kind introduction. Let me just begin by saying that I come to this event organized by the American Friends of Balochistan as a Pakistani friend of Balochistan. I'm a Pakistani, and I, like many Pakistanis, would like to see a civilian, democratic, politically stable, and economically strong Pakistan that guarantees rule of law and rights to all its component ethnicities and nationalities. A Pakistan that is at peace with itself and its neighbors. Obviously, that goal is not shared by Pakistan's national security establishment, which prefers to make Pakistan a safe haven for militants because it wants to pursue a policy of militarism. I understand and sympathize with the sentiments and feelings of my Baloch brothers. I am really honored that I have been invited here today, and I watch with great appreciation the efforts of Mr. Amar Masti Khan, who, against all odds, tries to keep the issue of Balochistan from his perspective alive in this city, where Balochistan is often ignored. Henry Kissinger once remarked in the 1960s when he was asked, what do you think about Balochistan? Balochistan was having one of its several insurgencies at that time, and he said, I wouldn't think of Balochistan if it hit me in the face. So basically that realpolitik approach has resulted in totally ignoring Balochistan and several other parts of Pakistan. The assumption in Washington is that as long as we are in contact with Rawalpindi and Islamabad, all is well in Pakistan. It is not. Instead of using force against the Baloch, it would be best for Pakistan to recognize the sentiments and aspirations of the Baloch people. It is tragic that those who advocate talks with globally recognized terrorists such as the Afghan Taliban have an intransigent position when it comes to engagement with the leaders and people of Balochistan. Only a few days ago, in Pakistan's major newspaper Dawn, Pakistan's Federal Minister for Ports and Shipping, Mr. Hasil Bizinjo, acknowledged that if a referendum were held in Balochistan today, the militants would win. He added that there will be no referendum, implying that the status quo would prevail through force. Nawab Akbar Bukti, the Lion of Balochistan, whose anniversary we observe today, was a Baloch icon. His life and his tragic death represent the troubled relationship between the militarized central government of Pakistan and the Baloch people living in Pakistan's Balochistan province. In 1948, Nawab Akbar Shahbaz Khan Bukti, then barely 20 years old, met Pakistan's founder, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. That photograph can easily be found on the internet. He was amongst those Baloch leaders who agreed to Balochistan joining Pakistan, provided it was provided autonomy and the promises of inclusion of the Baloch in Pakistani mainstream life were kept. Unfortunately, 58 years later, in August 2006, Nawab Bukti was killed as a rebel and painted as a traitor by the armed forces of Pakistan. In between 1948 and 2006, Nawab Bukti served as Pakistan's Minister of State at the federal level for Interior, Internal Security, and also as Governor and Chief Minister of Balochistan. Every Pakistani must reflect on how a man who embraced the idea of Pakistan soon after independence in 1948 and served at the highest levels of government ended up being a rebel to the Pakistani state and questioned the rationale and the idea of Pakistan as it exists today. We can either be arrogant and dish out labels of treason without trials, or act to ensure that other ethnic groups and nationalities within Pakistan, other than the majority Punjabis, are not pushed to the wall. We must think why today's Pakistan is looked upon with such concern and even suspicion by the rest of the world. We should examine why it is possible for Pakistan's armed forces to shut down the offices of Karachi's main political party, MQM, overnight, while they keep saying that they cannot shut down the offices of groups, terrorist groups that have been declared terrorist by the United Nations, and why that would take time. Offices of Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, even Ahl-e-Sunnat wal-Jamaat and Lashkar-e-Jhangvi continue to function under different names. And they cannot be shut because Pakistan's military says we need more capacity before we can act against them. And yet, a political party representing a major ethnic group can be shut down in that manner. Similarly, the oppression of the Baloch, which is a almost daily occurrence. Several Baloch political parties, including the political party founded by Nawab Akbar Bukti, the Balochistan, the Baloch Republican Party, they are not allowed to operate. So my question to the Pakistani state and all my fellow Pakistanis who look upon critics of the Pakistani state as somehow anti-Pakistan, we are not anti-Pakistan. We are just critics of a wrong policy. We see it as wrong for Pakistan and its 200 million people. That you can shut down representative organizations, you can force representative leaders into exile and then try to hound them, and you do not act against globally recognized terrorists. The transformation of erstwhile East Pakistan into Bangladesh should be a lesson on the limits of military power in building a nation or keeping a country together. Countries are kept together by the will of their people. They need to be kept together by healing wounds rather than inflicting wounds on different communities. Pakistan's history is replete with mishandling of various ethnicities and nationalities. Pashtun leaders like Bacha Khan, Abdul Samad Achakzai and Khan Abdul Wali Khan. Bengali leaders like AKM Fazlul Haq, Hussain Shahid Swarwardi and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, as well as Sindhi and Mahajir leaders have been labeled traitors when they disagreed with the overly centralized Pakistani state and advocated alternative policies than those embraced by Pakistan's post-British establishment. Unfortunately, the Pakistani establishment has received sustenance and support, extensive sustenance support to the tune of $40 billion from the United States. So all of you who are sitting here, who are American taxpayers, should be concerned that this policy is sustained through American assistance instead of helping Pakistan transform into a people-friendly government or nation. Even today, the Baloch and East Pakistani Bengalis were among the first to disagree with the West Pakistani security establishment. Starting from the 1970s, in particular, the Baloch have been fighting for more autonomy. Their struggle has been brutally suppressed by the Pakistani state. I will admit that there are Baloch who are now disillusioned to the point of demanding separation and independence from Pakistan. I may not agree with all of them, but I must recognize how they feel and why. Balochistan is geographically the largest of Pakistan's 4 provinces, but it is the least developed. Pakistan is urbanizing quickly, with 40% of its population now living in urban areas, but 75% of Balochistan remains rural. Pakistan's overall literacy rate now is 57%, which, by the way, is a shame in itself, because at the time of partition, Pakistan's literacy rate was 15%. India's was 18%. Today India's is 77%. Pakistan's is 57%. What was a 2% difference has become a 20% difference. So for those Pakistanis who always compare with India, they need to reflect on this. But more importantly, while Pakistan's literacy rate is 57%, the literacy rate for Balochistan is only 26%, barely 15% for females. And the issue is not, as it is often painted, the cussedness of the Sardars. It is actually the inavailability of resources and the lack of investment in primary education. If you see the pictures of schools in Balochistan, you will realize that they are not a patch on the schools that are provided for the rest of the country. 22% of Pakistan's overall population lives below the poverty line. But in Balochistan, those living below poverty, and in Pakistan, by the way, poverty is defined by those households that live on less than $1 a day. So you can imagine it's a pretty low line anyway. 50% of Balochistan's population lives below the poverty line. Urban unemployment in Balochistan is twice the percentage of the rest of Pakistan. Balochistan provides 40% of Pakistan's energy needs and 36% of its gas production, along with minerals. And yet, 47% of Balochistan's households have no electricity, and only 25% of Balochistan's villages are electrified. Now, on the side of human rights violations. According to the latest US Department of State Human Rights report on Pakistan, and I quote, "Security forces committed extrajudicial killings in connection with the conflict in Balochistan," unquote. Another quote from the report, "The most serious human rights problems were extrajudicial and targeted killings, disappearances, torture, lack of rule of law, including lack of due process, poor implementation and enforcement of laws, and frequent mob violence and vigilante justice and sectarian violence," all of which was in heavier doses in Balochistan than the rest of Pakistan. In a report in 2014, the International Crisis Group pointed out that Pakistan's policy in Balochistan has been one of brutally suppressing the Baloch insurgency instead of trying to understand and accommodate demands for political and economic autonomy. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, the last few years have seen a rise in civilian casualties in Balochistan because of operations by the security forces. Even the government is forced to acknowledge that its conduct in Balochistan has been far from exemplary. According to a 2014 report by the Balochistan government's Home and Tribal Affairs Department, over 800 bodies were found in the province over a period of 3.5 years. Bodies that had been basically people that had been killed and dumped. 466 victims were identified as ethnic Baloch. More than half of those dead bodies belonged to ethnic Baloch. 123 as ethnic Pashtuns, and 107 from other ethnicities, including the Hazara. Even at the end of the year, 107 bodies were unidentified because they had been disfigured to the point of making it difficult to identify them, or members of their families were in hiding because of the Pakistan military operation and therefore were unable to come and identify those dead bodies. Of the 466 Baloch killed in the province, most were, and this is not me saying, this is the government of Balochistan's Home Department's report of 2014. Of the 466 Baloch killed in the province, most were political workers, meaning activists of various Baloch nationalist political parties. Balochistan comprises 43% of Pakistan's land area and 7% of Pakistan's population. But the representation of the Baloch in Pakistan's institutions is not proportional even to their relatively small number. According to a report by Pakistan Institute for Peace Studies, as of 2005, there was not a single Baloch at the head of the top 200 businesses in Pakistan, not one Baloch ambassador, and only 502 Baloch were recruited in the army on average a year, or people from Balochistan. According to reports by Pakistani experts and the International Crisis Group, as of 2006, there were only 15,000 Baloch in the 550-strong Pakistan army, excluding paramilitary forces, approximately 1.3% of the army. Consider the fact that the province of Pakistan, that accounts for 54% of the country's population, provides 72% of the soldiers of the army. It was these injustices that Nawab Akbar Bukti spoke out against. I had the honor of meeting him on several occasions. In fact, as a very young man, he once asked me to consider working with him when he had been elected as Chief Minister of Balochistan. He was a giant of a man, very knowledgeable, very widely read, but concerned about the tribe that he saw himself as the guardian and patriarch of, the Bukti tribe, but at the same time also of all Baloch people. He often paid attention to every literate Baloch that came his way. Anybody who could read and write, was a journalist, was a political activist, whatever political parties, although he was in politics directly, he was a politician, but he reached beyond his party sometimes to interact with Baloch from other parties. And then he always wanted alliances with Pakistanis who believed in civil society and democracy. And he was very clear that Pakistan's biggest problem was the dominance of one institution overall and an outlook that just does not allow open and free debate. And when you actually put that kind of a lid on free and open debate, and then also repress people, try to snatch their resources, try to deprive them of what they feel is their right, start building ports where no local is employed, start building roadways where no local is employed, start giving concessions to foreign powers but do not give any opportunities to the locals, then you are definitely buying trouble. And that is the trouble that Balochistan faces today. We should all, especially Pakistanis, stand beside their Baloch brethren to demand their rights. Unfortunately, if we don't do that, others will. And that is the reason why I am here. For those Pakistanis who at the end of the day will come and taunt me and say, how dare you go to this Baloch event and identify with the Baloch instead with the rest of the Pakistanis, because I'm not an ethnic Baloch, I'm an ethnic Mahajir. But the fact of the matter is that either Pakistanis speak up for Balochistan or others will start speaking up for Balochistan. And just as I don't think it is in Pakistan's interest to oppress the Baloch or to allow injustices to prevail, I would also say that it is not in the interest of the Baloch people to let their traditional historic homeland become a battleground for rival external powers. So the Pakistanis need to stand up for the rights of the Baloch, and the Baloch need to guard against their homeland becoming a battleground of external powers. The people of Balochistan deserve better than being oppressed from Rawalpindi and Islamabad or being used as pawns in international games from other capitals. Instead of attacking and destroying the Baloch, Sindhi, Pashtun, Hazara, Gilgit-Baltistan or Mahajir identities, the Pakistani military establishment should focus on eliminating safe havens for international terrorists like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Afghan and Pakistani Taliban. I join all of you in recognizing, respecting, and paying tribute to the ultimate sacrifice of Nawab Akbar Bukti for the Baloch people. May that sacrifice and the sacrifice of thousands of Baloch men and women bear fruit, and may Balochistan get justice soon. Thank you all very much.